Greetings to all lovers of historical mysteries and ancient civilizations. Today we are embarking on a journey to one of the most impressive yet little known ancient structures in the world, the mysterious stone city of Great Zimbabwe. Imagine magnificent walls of perfectly fitted stone blocks, rising 10 meters high without using any mortar, intricate towers and building complexes, all this in the heart of Africa, far from known centers of ancient civilizations. Who were these mysterious builders? How did they manage to create such an impressive architectural complex? And why has the history of this amazing place been shrouded in myths and misconceptions for so long? If you are interested in amazing historical discoveries, forgotten civilizations, and solutions to archaeological mysteries, be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every week we explore the most intriguing puzzles of the past based on the latest scientific data and results of archaeological excavations. And today, we will reveal the secret of Great Zimbabwe, an ancient city whose grandeur challenges our perceptions of African history. Let's start with what Great Zimbabwe is and where it is located. Great Zimbabwe is a vast complex of stone structures located in modern Zimbabwe, approximately 280 kilometers from the country's capital, Harare. The name Zimbabwe comes from the word Zimbabwe in the Shona language, meaning houses of stone or stone buildings. It was this ancient structure that gave the entire country its name after gaining independence in 1980. The Great Zimbabwe complex consists of three main parts: the hill fortress, located on top of a granite hill, the Great Enclosure, the most impressive structure with massive walls up to 11 meters high, and the Valley of Ruins, an extensive area with numerous remains of stone buildings. The total area of the complex is about 720 hectares, making it the largest ancient stone structure south of the Sahara. The most impressive element of the complex is the Great Enclosure, an elliptical wall about 250 meters long, up to 5 meters thick and up to 11 meters high. This wall was built without using mortar, with stones simply stacked on top of each other with astonishing precision. Inside the enclosure are the remains of numerous structures, including a conical tower about 10 meters high, the purpose of which still causes debates among archaeologists. The hill fortress is a complex of structures on the top and slopes of a granite hill. Here are the remains of residential and ceremonial buildings, connected by a complex system of passages and staircases. From the top of the hill, there is an impressive view of the surrounding area, which made this place an ideal observation point. The Valley of Ruins is an extensive area with numerous remains of stone buildings, which probably served as dwellings for most of the population of the ancient city. Here are also ruins that archaeologists interpret as workshops, warehouses, and other economic structures. But who built this impressive complex? When was it erected, and which people created this amazing civilization? These questions have long been the subject of fierce debate and even political manipulation. When Europeans first encountered the ruins of Great Zimbabwe in the late 19th century, they were amazed by the scale and complexity of the structures. However, they were struck not only by the architecture, but also by their own prejudices. In the era of colonialism and racial discrimination, many Europeans could not accept the idea that Africans were capable of creating such impressive structures. Therefore, theories emerged that Great Zimbabwe was built by Phoenicians, Arabs, Persians, or even the lost tribes of Israel. One of the main propagandists of the non-African origin of Great Zimbabwe was the British explorer and journalist Cecil Rhodes, after whom the colony of Rhodesia, modern Zimbabwe, was named. He and his followers claimed that the ruins were the remains of the biblical Ophir, the legendary country from which King Solomon received gold. This theory had no scientific basis, but it served colonial ideology perfectly, justifying European dominance in the region. The first scientific studies of Great Zimbabwe were conducted in the early 20th century by British archaeologist David Randall McIver, who, based on artifacts found, concluded that the complex was built by local African peoples. However, his conclusions were met with distrust and even hostility from the colonial authorities. In 1929, another British archaeologist, Gertrude Caton Thompson, conducted more thorough excavations and confirmed the African origin of Great Zimbabwe. Her research showed that the complex was built by ancestors of the Shona people, who still live in this region. However, even after this, the colonial authorities of Rhodesia continued to propagate the version of the non-African origin of the ruins, and visitors were shown only those artifacts that could confirm this version. Only after Zimbabwe gained independence in 1980 did systematic scientific research of the complex begin without political prejudices. Modern archaeological data unequivocally indicate that Great Zimbabwe was built by Africans, ancestors of the modern Shona, and was the center of a powerful state that flourished in the region from the 11th to the 15th century of our era. Dating of various parts of the complex, conducted using radiocarbon analysis, shows that the first buildings on the hill appeared around the 11th century. The Great Enclosure and most other structures were built between the 13th and 15th centuries, during the period of the highest prosperity of the Zimbabwe state. By the end of the 15th century, most of the complex was abandoned, although some parts continued to be used later. But what was the state that created this impressive architectural complex? Archaeological data and oral traditions of the Shona people allow us to reconstruct some aspects of its history and organization. The state of Zimbabwe emerged in the context of developing trade between the interior regions of Africa and the Indian Ocean coast. From the 10th century of our era, trading cities founded by Arab and Persian merchants began to appear on the east coast of Africa. They traded with the interior regions of the continent, obtaining gold, ivory, animal skins, and slaves in exchange for fabrics, beads, porcelain, and other imported goods. The territory of modern Zimbabwe is rich in gold deposits, and control over these resources became the foundation of the power of the Zimbabwe state. Archaeological findings show that the inhabitants of Great Zimbabwe were actively engaged in gold mining and processing as well as trading it. Numerous artifacts have been found in the ruins, testifying to trade connections with the coast: Arab coins, Chinese porcelain, Persian beads. The state of Zimbabwe was a monarchy, headed by a ruler with the title Mwene Mutapa, Lord of the Mines. He relied on a complex administrative system and religious authority. Great Zimbabwe was not only a political capital, but also an important religious center where ceremonies related to the cult of ancestors and fertility were held. The social structure of society was complex and hierarchical. At the top were the royal family and aristocracy, who lived in the Great Enclosure and on the hill fortress. Below were craftsmen, merchants, warriors, and farmers who populated the Valley of Ruins and surrounding settlements. Archaeological data show that the population of Great Zimbabwe during its heyday could reach 10 to 20,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in Africa at that time. Building such large-scale stone structures required significant resources and organized labor. Stones for the walls were extracted from nearby quarries and processed on site. Archaeologists suggest that construction was carried out under the guidance of specialized masters who passed their skills from generation to generation. The unique style of masonry, in which stones are laid without mortar and held by their own weight, required high craftsmanship and understanding of the principles of statics. But why did this powerful state decline, and Great Zimbabwe was abandoned? Archaeologists put forward several hypotheses. One of them links the decline to the depletion of local resources, especially gold deposits and pastures. Another version speaks of possible climatic changes that led to droughts and made agriculture in the region less productive. The third hypothesis links the decline to political factors. Perhaps centrifugal forces in the expanded state led to its disintegration into several smaller political entities. Whatever the reason, by the end of the 15th century, most of Great Zimbabwe was abandoned, and the center of political power moved north, where the new state of Monomutapa emerged. However, the memory of Great Zimbabwe was preserved in the oral traditions of the Shona people, and some parts of the complex continued to be used for religious ceremonies until the 19th century. When Europeans first learned about Great Zimbabwe from Portuguese traders in the 16th century, it was already in ruins, but even in this state, it made a huge impression on travelers. Later, in the 19th century, when Europeans began to actively explore the interior regions of Africa, Great Zimbabwe became the object of intense interest and speculation. Unfortunately, this interest often led to destruction. Many early explorers were essentially treasure hunters who excavated ruins in search of gold and other valuables, not caring about preserving the archaeological context. Richard Hall gained particularly notorious fame conducting excavations at the beginning of the 20th century on behalf of Cecil Rhodes. He literally cleared the ruins, removing cultural layers that he considered African garbage, in search of evidence of an ancient white civilization. As a result of his activities, many archaeological data were irretrievably lost. Only in the 20th century, with the development of professional archaeology, did serious scientific research of Great Zimbabwe begin. This research continues today, gradually revealing new aspects of this amazing civilization. One of the most interesting questions is the architectural style of Great Zimbabwe. The unique technique of stone masonry without using mortar has no direct analogues either in Africa or beyond. Where did these construction skills come from? Did they develop independently or were they borrowed? Archaeologists believe that the construction technique of Great Zimbabwe was a local invention that gradually developed and improved over several centuries. Earlier and less complex stone structures discovered in the region show a gradual evolution of construction methods, which reached their peak in the Great Enclosure and other structures of the main complex. Particularly impressive is the ability of Great Zimbabwe builders to work with local material. Granite, which is an extremely hard and difficult stone to process. They not only learned to effectively extract and process this stone, but also developed construction techniques that allow creating stable and durable structures without using modern tools. Another interesting aspect of Great Zimbabwe is its layout and functional zoning. The complex was not a chaotic cluster of buildings, it had a clear structure reflecting the social organization of society. The hill fortress and the great enclosure were probably residences of the elite and places for important ceremonies, while the Valley of Ruins was inhabited by ordinary citizens and craftsmen. Archaeological findings show that in Great Zimbabwe there was a division of labor and specialization of crafts. Potters, blacksmiths, jewelers, wood and stone carvers, weavers worked here. Their products were of high quality and artistic value, which testifies to a developed material culture. Special mention should be made of stone bird sculptures found in Great Zimbabwe. These sculptures, carved from soapstone, depict birds of prey sitting on columns. Archaeologists believe that they had important religious significance and were possibly symbols of royal power. The Zimbabwe bird became a national symbol of modern Zimbabwe and is depicted on the flag and coat of arms of the country. No less interesting is the daily life of the inhabitants of Great Zimbabwe. Archaeological data show that the basis of the economy was cattle breeding, supplemented by agriculture and trade. Cattle were not only a source of food, but also a measure of wealth and status. Farmers grew millet, sorghum, legumes, and other crops adapted to the local climate. The diet of Great Zimbabwe residents was diverse and included meat from domestic and wild animals, dairy products, grains, legumes, fruits, and vegetables. Analysis of bone remains shows that the population was generally healthy and well-fed, especially the elite. What was the daily life of an ordinary resident of Great Zimbabwe like? Archaeological data and ethnographic parallels with modern Shona allow us to make some assumptions. Most people lived in round houses built of wood and clay with thatched roofs. These houses were grouped into family complexes, surrounded by palisades or stone walls. The day began early, with sunrise. Women were engaged in cooking, childcare, making ceramics and fabrics. Men herded cattle, hunted, engaged in metallurgy and construction. Children helped adults and played, simultaneously mastering skills that would be useful to them in adult life. Religious life was centered around the cult of ancestors and belief in a supreme deity known as Mwari. Ceremonies related to the agricultural cycle, important life events, and veneration of ancestors were regularly held. These ceremonies included music, dancing, sacrifices, and ritual meals. The social structure was based on kinship, with large extended families united into clans. Leadership was hereditary, but also depended on personal qualities and achievements. The judicial system was based on customary law, with various levels of courts, from family to royal. Trade played an important role in the life of Great Zimbabwe. The state controlled trade routes between the interior regions of Africa and the Indian Ocean coast. The main export goods were gold, ivory, animal skins, and slaves. Fabrics, beads, porcelain, glass, and other luxury items were imported. Trade was conducted through a network of intermediaries, and there was probably no direct contact between the inhabitants of Great Zimbabwe and Arab or Persian merchants. Surprisingly, despite active trade, Great Zimbabwe had no writing system of its own. Information was transmitted orally through a complex system of oral traditions, songs, and proverbs. This is typical for many African societies, where oral tradition reached a high level of development. However, the absence of written sources creates significant difficulties for historians trying to reconstruct the history of the Zimbabwe state. We are forced to rely on archaeological data, oral traditions collected many centuries later, and scarce mentions in Arab and Portuguese sources. Great Zimbabwe was not an isolated phenomenon. It was part of a broader cultural tradition that archaeologists call the Zimbabwe culture. This tradition includes many other stone structures scattered throughout the territory of modern Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and parts of South Africa. Some of them, such as Kami and Danangombe, are impressive complexes, although on a smaller scale than Great Zimbabwe. These structures testify that the Zimbabwe culture was widespread in the region and existed for a long period. After the decline of Great Zimbabwe, the center of political power moved first to the north, where the state of Monomotapa emerged, and then to the southwest, where the Kami culture developed. The legacy of Great Zimbabwe is alive today. After gaining independence in 1980, the new state was named Zimbabwe in honor of this ancient complex. The Zimbabwe bird became a national symbol, appearing on the flag, coat of arms, and currency of the country. Great Zimbabwe is seen as a symbol of African achievements and a refutation of colonial myths about the primitiveness of pre-colonial Africa. In 1986, Great Zimbabwe was included in the UNESCO World Heritage List, emphasizing its global cultural significance. Today, it is an important tourist and educational center where visitors can learn about the amazing civilization that created these impressive structures. Modern archaeological research of Great Zimbabwe continues, using new technologies and methods. Magnetometric studies, aerial photography, DNA analysis, and other modern methods provide new information without destructive excavations. This research gradually reveals new aspects of this amazing civilization. One of the most interesting directions of modern research is the study of the interconnections of Great Zimbabwe with other African civilizations and with the wider world of the Indian Ocean. Findings of Chinese porcelain, Persian beads, and other imported goods indicate that Great Zimbabwe was part of an extensive trade network connecting Africa with Asia long before the arrival of Europeans. This research helps us better understand Africa's place in world history and refute the Eurocentric view that has long dominated historiography. They show that Africa was not an isolated continent waiting to be discovered by Europeans, but was an active participant in world processes, with its own developed civilizations and cultures. The history of Great Zimbabwe also teaches us how political prejudices can distort scientific research. Colonial myths about the non-African origin of the ruins not only distorted historical truth but also served as an instrument of racial discrimination and colonial domination. They deprived African peoples of their historical heritage and reinforced false notions about their inability to create complex civilizations. Returning Great Zimbabwe to its true creators, the ancestors of the modern Shona, is not only restoring historical justice but also recognizing the richness and diversity of human culture. It is a reminder that human history is not the history of one or a few great civilizations, but a mosaic of many cultures, each of which has made its unique contribution to the common heritage of humanity. Great Zimbabwe continues to hold many secrets. We still do not know exactly what its builders called themselves, what their political system was like, how they imagined the world. Many questions remain unanswered, and perhaps some of them will never be resolved due to the lack of written sources and irreplaceable losses of archaeological material as a result of unprofessional excavations. But each new fragment of information, each new finding, helps us better understand this amazing civilization and its place in the history of Africa and the world. And perhaps most importantly, they help us overcome prejudices and stereotypes that have too long distorted our perception of African history. So, who built Great Zimbabwe? The answer is simple and at the same time complex. It was built by Africans, ancestors of the modern Shona, who created a powerful state that controlled the trade of gold and other valuable goods between the interior regions of Africa and the Indian Ocean coast. This state had a complex social structure, developed material culture, and impressive architectural traditions. It was not isolated but was part of a broader Zimbabwe culture and had connections with distant regions through the trade networks of the Indian Ocean. Great Zimbabwe is not just an impressive architectural complex, it is a symbol of the achievements of African civilizations and a reminder of the richness and diversity of human culture. And the more we learn about it, the more amazing and impressive it appears to us. Thank you for joining me on this journey to one of the most impressive but little-known wonders of the ancient world. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new episodes about mysterious civilizations and amazing archaeological discoveries. And in the comments, tell us if you've heard of Great Zimbabwe before, and what other little-known ancient structures you would like us to explore in future episodes. In upcoming videos, we will continue to explore amazing but little-known civilizations from around the world that challenge our perceptions of the past and remind us of the richness and diversity of human culture. Until next time,